We also had an anniversary in Germany. They just marked the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I want to remind you again, the Berlin Wall was set up to separate Western Germany, which was free, and Eastern Germany, which was socialist/communist. It's important to understand that this was viewed to be by many the way it was always going to be. That one of the ways we settled after World War II, and we had the communists expanding out of Russia, and so we got to this settlement. Okay, we're going to divide Germany. We're going to divide within the city of Berlin. And for many people, it was just viewed as, well, this is the way it is. This is how we got settled. At least we have half the German city of Berlin free, and we have Europe free, even though this darkness was spread from Russia and throughout Eastern Europe of socialism, communism, repression, tyranny, murder, horrific living conditions, horrific life under communism. But a man named President Ronald Reagan came along in America, and he had decided, we have to speak up about the evils of communism. We have to call it evil. And it's interesting now because everyone looks back and says, well, yeah, it was a great thing. Ronald Reagan gave that speech at the Brandenburg Gate. It was, I wrote the date down, June 12th, 1987. June 12th, 1987, Reagan makes a speech at the Brandenburg Gate, Berlin Wall, and says to Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And lo and behold, November of 1989, the wall came down. So this was just the 30th anniversary in Germany, just celebrated 2 days ago, of this bringing down of the wall, the Berlin Wall. Again, I'm going to tie this into what's happening in America today, but I want to make a couple points about what happened at that time. First of all, as we've talked about in the show before, I'm sure you're aware, but when President Reagan was going to go give that speech at the Brandenburg Gate, at the Berlin Wall, he wanted the line in, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. Virtually all of his advisors, the high-level State Department, well-informed, Ivy League educated, very savvy, very international people, kept telling him not to say that. They tried to tell him this is unwise. You cannot tell Gorbachev he's got to take that wall down. You can't say that. It will provoke anger. It will provoke outrage. You're not allowed to. It's not none of your business. They're allowed to have a wall. And what I want to say about Reagan really ties into Veterans Day and what it means to defend America. Ronald Reagan recognized and just said, communism is evil. He did not, as many people today, intellectuals do today, academia does today, intellectuals in his time said, you know what? Who are you to judge communism? Who are you to tell them that their system is wrong? It was this gradual acceptance of the idea of the moral equivalency of all ideas. The idea that, well, just because we in America love freedom and free markets and we love our entrepreneurship, we love freedom, doesn't mean that the people in Eastern Europe living under tyranny and repression of Russia and the tyranny and repression of communism, who are you to say, President Reagan, that they're not happy? Hey, they might love it. And who are you to judge whether freedom is better than communism? Who are you to say? And this is what I mean about leadership. Again, on Veterans Day, I'm grateful for the physical, moral bravery of all of our veterans, people who actually went and fought in wars and put their lives at risk. I am grateful beyond words. But other warriors also have protected and defended America, Ronald Reagan being one of them. And in his case, instead of the physical battle, he was saying we're going to take on the ideological battle that says we're not going to agree that communism is okay. We're not going to agree that socialism is fair. We're not going to agree that there's perfectly valid reasons to love freedom and other perfectly valid reasons to love repression, socialism, communism, and tyranny. He just said what was true, and the world knew it. The free world knew it, but it became the savvy thing in Washington to be unwilling to acknowledge it. Like it was, you can't really say there's anything wrong with that. And on top of that, Reagan decided we have to fight socialism and communism not in a physical war, but in an ideological war. It was an information war, it was a propaganda war, it was a spying war, it was an economic war. It was taking on the evil of socialism and communism with a variety of other tactics available to people, to free people like in America, who aren't going to have a physical military invasion of Russia or a military invasion and push in East Germany and push the Russians back. We didn't have to have that kind of war. Reagan was pointing out, we can have what came to be called the Cold War. We can use military pressure, military spending, building up from military, and all sorts of other avenues and vehicles we have available to fight socialism and communism. But to get to the point you can agree with yourself that that was an okay thing to do, you have to be willing to have the clarity to understand that there actually are good systems and bad systems. You had to be aware that freedom and free markets are good, and repression and tyranny and socialism and communism are bad. You had to get there, and then you had to be the leader to get him to the point where he would say, at the Brandenburg Gate, tear down that wall. This was fighting for America. This is fighting for freedom. Because communists, as you well know, were always their plan, and through Russia, especially the communist Russia was the plan, the socialist, the USSR, the plan was to take over the world for communism, nothing less. They did not think, okay, we have our little territory, you have your territory. Communist expansion was going to go on and on and on until America or other brave people willing to speak up for freedom said no. And this was the leadership of Ronald Reagan, who said, you know what? The wall must come down. There's a great piece, by the way, I guess it was from the Hoover Institute. There's a guy, that's at Stanford. There's the Hoover Institute's at Stanford, and there was a gentleman there who was a former speechwriter named for Reagan, and his name is Peter Robinson, and he wrote a piece. Again, you can get it on our website, americacanwetalk.org, and he wrote essentially about all the arguments the high-level advisors of Ronald Reagan, President Reagan, made to him about, you can't say that. You really shouldn't be saying that. You can't say, who are you to say communism is bad? But Reagan was savvy enough, and he was clear-thinking enough, and he was brave enough to not surrender to what is, in fact, more so today than in his time, but the State Department, ruling elite, really well informed, way down the weeds. We understand all this stuff at the high level. We understand, some people are free, some are not, and everything's okay. And you never ever challenge the core ideology of socialism. Those kind of messages came from his advisors. The same way today, many State Department ruling elite, we call them now the deep state or the ruling elite classes. Same kind of advice. Don't be bold. Don't say what's true. Don't speak up for truth. Just kind of be gentle and be agreeable and everything is fine. No matter what people want is fine. That same mentality resides in the State Department today as did in Ronald Reagan's time. So one last thing I'll say before I turn to my last topic. But on the subject of this, the 30th anniversary of the ending of the Berlin Wall. At that point, now some of my listeners, you probably remember that well. Other ones, you might be thinking, I got to look up in a history book because you weren't even born yet. But I want to tell you that at that time, virtually everyone in America, leaving aside the communists who have had a communist party in America since whatever it is, 1920 or something. I mean, the Communist Party has been in America a long time, but it was well recognized as a radical, irresponsible, un-American, to be rejected, never to be listened to, wild segment of thought that had no place in America. It's legal in America to be the Communist Party. It's legal to be a member of the Communist Party. But America knew, the culture and fabric of America knew that what communism was pure evil. Reagan could speak that way because America knew that communism was evil. Fast forward to today, 2019. We have one honest candidate on the Democrat side running for president, Bernie Sanders, who is a Democrat socialist. And when you're finished reading all the programs he wants to put into place, you realize his presidency will be one of utter tyranny. He actually praised praised Venezuela as they were falling into socialistic ruin as the America of our future. Bernie Sanders said of Venezuela, you are the future of America. This is a guy who is fine with socialism, fine with communism. In fact, I shared a poll in the show, 2 weeks ago or so, talking about the fact that young people polled. It isn't just that young people in America think socialism is kind of cool, maybe okay. You had a significant chunk saying that communism might be a really good idea. We have failed in our country to teach the next generation the same lessons that everyone knew back at the time Reagan gave his speech at the Brandenburg Gate at the Berlin Wall in 1987, saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." The whole world knew what he meant. America knew what he meant. But the rise of socialism as an allegedly legitimate alternative to freedom, the rise of the tolerance of communism as maybe a legitimate alternative to freedom and free markets in this country is palpable, it's visible in polls, and it's dangerous. We have a big job on our hands in this country to get hold again of the American political conversation, of academia, from graduate school down to kindergarten, that fails to teach the universal greatness of freedom, the idea that America is founded on freedom, the idea that freedom is a right from God because you're born, which is what the Declaration in essence says. We haven't taught that. We haven't embraced it. We haven't made it part of who we are as America. So 30 years after the Berlin Wall falls, if you could have told people at that time that you would have a presidential candidate in serious contention on the Democrat side who's an open socialist, who happily would agree to allow massive tax bills to pass that would essentially take away the private wealth of people in this country who have earned it. People would have said, back when Reagan gave his speech in 87, when the wall fell in 89, no way, that's never going to happen. America's too smart for that. We know better. We know freedom is better. We know socialism is evil. We know communism is evil. But here we are, 2019, one of the central battles of the 2020 election cycle, and there will be many, but one of them is going to be making clear the true evil of socialism, not tiptoeing around socialism on the conservative side, saying, well, maybe some parts of it okay, well, maybe that. No, the reason that we will prevail, we need the strength of Ronald Reagan when he spoke at the Brandenburg Wall. We need the strength of leaders who will speak up and say, this is evil, in order for us to be able to banish that again from our American political, at a serious level, the American political dialogue, to banish the idea that's ever acceptable in this country, to have socialism as a core idea that may be a springboard for laws, regulations, in America's government.